Okay, so I'm super excited. We're chatting with Kit Harrington today. And so those of you in our course, we have been reading this, our textbook comes from the Natural Start Alliance, and Kit works with the Natural Start Alliance. So I am gonna just kind of hand it over to Kit to introduce herself, and we're just gonna jump in today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Kit Harrington, and I am the Senior Policy Advisor for the Natural Start Alliance. I live in Colchester, Vermont. But my journey in outdoor and nature-based education actually started in Washington State. It started long before that here in Vermont as a kid in the woods. But this here is a picture of the forest school that I co-founded back in 2013, the Fiddleheads Forest School at the University of Washington. And, it's been really incredible to get to be a part of this evolving field and the advocacy movement that we're starting to see, and now to continue to support it with Natural Start. I think this is just such an incredibly exciting time to be a nature-based educator, to be a part of this community, to be lifting up such a critical and powerful experience for children and families in this transformative and challenging time that we're all experiencing together. And so, it's amazing how much has happened in a really short period of time. And I'm just going to kind of reflect a little bit on my process. Because there have definitely been times where I thought, oh, I'm not an advocate, or I don't have any expertise in policy. Where do I fit in this movement? Or even like, how do I see myself? And, certainly when we started Fiddleheads Forest School, it was one of the first entirely outdoor programs, and certainly in an urban setting in a public park. And we had no idea whether it was even something that we didn't even know, we didn't know how families would respond. This is a picture of me during our first week at Fiddleheads. We didn't know what to anticipate. And our goal was really to open ourselves up as much as possible to the families and to the environment. And to let that be our guide. Of course, that was a sunny day. I'm dressed completely inappropriately because, again, I had no idea really what I was in for, which was the wettest day on record in Seattle history at the time. I think we've exceeded it then. But just got to be part of this really amazing experience with kids and families. And and I remember in the beginning, the early days, feeling really alone, as these challenges arose, not really knowing, I'm sure, April, you probably had similar experiences too, of saying there's certain things about making the choice to really embrace the outdoor environment, how we're communicating it with families, how we're prioritizing safety, centering inclusion, all of those things that have these unique challenges and incredible opportunities that come up with them. But not very long ago, we didn't necessarily have like a shared space to reflect on that together. And it's amazing and so exciting and powerful to have, courses like the one that you're teaching to like cultivate these spaces. And that's kind of what led me and a couple of others to found the Washington Nature Preschool Association, which was our first step towards starting to think kind of collectively about what our needs were, to be able to, when a storm came through, say, how are we talking about this with families? How are we, reflecting the impact on the space? How are we dealing with shared issues? And then that in turn ultimately became a foundation for advocacy and for the passage of, I think what we now see as sort of the first major policy move for outdoor and nature-based programs in the outdoor preschool licensing pilot bill that was passed in, I think, 2015 or 2016. We've gone through, the pilot, we've gone through a few iterations since then. And it really has been this pretty amazing process to get to be a part of, to get to involve families in, and now to start to see continue to sort of grow and organically and across the country and influence others around the country too. And so I want to share this graph because I think it's a great example of the excitement and enthusiasm and just like power of what's happening right now, but also how new it is. You can see the little orange dot was 2013 when Fiddleheads was founded, not very long ago, but on the scale of programs, there were very, very few, even nature-based, much less entirely outdoor at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And the reason I highlight that is because, I think when it comes to thinking about advocacy, advocating for ourselves, advocating for our families, for just kind of figuring out what that process looks like, outdoor preschool licensing is frequently the thing that comes up all the time. But I think the reason for that is we're just at the very start of starting to understand what it means, like how we operate together, what our identity is, what we're grounded in, the values that we're grounded in, and what it means to take collective action to break down barriers to access and really be able to practice in a way that's authentic to us as individuals, to our communities, to that is inclusive of different cultures, different needs, and so I think that's part of why it's such a really exciting place to be right now. And this is just a little bit of a lens again of you can see how quickly things have progressed. I also work in Vermont here with Voices for Vermont's Children, and we work on many policy issues that frequently can take decades or more, many decades to move. So thinking about the fact that the Washington Nature Preschool Association just was founded in 2016, and now we're starting to see bills not just passed in Washington, but all over the country only a few years later, I think is a testament to how important this work is in this moment, and how impactful it is for families and for teachers, for legislators and policymakers, and just for communities too. And I want to share this quote here, and then I'll kind of take a pause. And this is from a friend and colleague of mine, another co-author of the Nature-Based Preschool Professional Practices Guidebook, Dr. Sheila Williams-Ridge, who shared, "Policy is what we do as leaders in saying what we believe is important and how we believe a school should function." And I think that's exactly it. And it, I think when I think about where many educators are in this process, it's we're getting, as we're stepping into this field, we're stepping into, new experiences, welcoming them in, figuring out what works for us and how they align with our values. It's this opportunity to start to say, I have an important role, I have an important voice to add to what's happening, and just being able to really welcome and embrace all of those voices as much as possible.
That's fantastic. I think too, one of the connections that I'm making, or kind of reminding me, is one of my students in this college course had shared, well, I thought I was just playing outside with kids. And then I'm in this college class and I'm realizing, oh, this is bigger than myself. And it's like, that to me is like kind of part of that idea of advocacy. It's like, we want to create awesome programming for our children and awesome experiences for our kids in nature, and, eliminating barriers for our local kids to be in with us, but then also to be thinking about, this is happening all around the country. And so that graph of just like that spike in the rise of outdoor and nature-based schools is awesome. And to know that some programs may never be, many programs are never going to be fully outdoors, but really embracing nature-based approaches and really putting that at the heart, the center of their curriculums, and seeing the benefits of getting kids outside. And there's just such a growing body of research. Like, not only is that spike in, the presence of programs, but the quality of resources that are out there and the information to affirm this practice is huge. And so whether you're coming at it from, thinking about the benefits as for physical development, or the social emotional kinds of development that, is unique, these unique experiences get to have for children, or if you think about the environmental education aspect of it, to the stewardship, to, and it's just like the list goes on. And I don't know, when I think about advocacy, I think earlier in my career, when I thought about advocacy, it was like, thank goodness someone else is doing that over there, and you begin to realize, oh, I'm actually am part of a system, and my voice and sharing, kind of like what this quote is talking about, is like, it is what we do, and so being a leader doesn't mean that you have to have a particular job title, but being a leader is just saying out loud, what it is that you believe, and helping others to understand the importance of what we're doing. And it's not just, isn't it cute that kids are playing with sticks in the forest? But it's like, no, there's huge benefits happening here.
Yeah. And it's respect for the process and for the educators. And just as I'm reflecting and thinking about it, I didn't necessarily see myself at all in this way to begin with, but I would say, anyone who is teaching, practicing education, especially thinking about nature-based education, is an advocate. We're advocating, we're creating change in the children that we work with. And that's whether we're, like a lead teacher in the classroom, we're stepping in. I think no matter what, you have this important role in creating a bridge to valuing and engaging and benefiting from, this critical resource that's like central to our existence as humans, during a really transformative time for our planet as a whole. And so I think that's part of feeling comfortable with advocacy is recognizing it doesn't have to look like any one sort of thing. But in each of our choices, we're making, when it comes to how we engage with children and families and how we choose to take it further or engage with our communities in different ways, or not, all of those have, consequences and impact the communities that we're a part of, and, that can have ripple effects, certainly too. So we're all a part of this process, one way or another.
Yeah. And it's great to feel that support. One of the first articles we read in the course was a Claire Warden one, where she was talking about, the mycelia, and how we are, with nature pedagogy around the world, it looks different, and it pops up in different places and looks different, and implemented in different ways, and their methodologies, teaching practices, those things can be, very, very divergent. But the shared thread that we have is that we really want kids to feel connected to nature. So, you're describing this urban program that you created in a public park, and it's like, yeah, it can look that way, because I think sometimes, particularly for us who are so used to more of like a forest model in a rural parts of our state of Vermont, it's like we think of it as one way. And so I think even knowing out that across our country and across the globe that other people are doing the same work, and it's showing up different ways, because it's like, I would love to go to beach school one day. I'd love to like retire and be the volunteer at the beach school and walk, and what does the year-long experience look like, living, and learning in the tidal pools. Like, that's just, I don't know, exciting.
I have memories of dreaming about that, actually, with the woman who created this quote was exactly that, thinking about, and there's an outdoor preschool in Lahaina that recently is on its way to hopefully being opened soon in Hawaii. And it is so exciting to see that and to recognize that. And it's also helped me, I think, as an educator, to recognize that each of us brings our own lens to this, and it really shapes the kinds of experiences that we provide. And the more that I can realize that the way that lens shapes how families engage, the better able I've been to start to think about what does it mean to really break down barriers to access, to shift toward inclusion. And, because we do know that, we recently published our survey, let me see, in 20 of nature preschools. And what we found as well was that we're not seeing the same diversity that I think our values really reflect, the diversity of the environments that we're entering into. And not only that, but it's that's something that's persisting across time. And so I think in a state like Vermont, especially, we have this opportunity to really think about how can we engage with all these other models and start to recognize there's all these different ways of practicing nature-based programs around nature-based education, not just around Vermont and around the country, but around the world too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that one of the week's modules, we were really, thinking about equity and access and inclusion. And, this just really speaks to the fact that it is primarily white children that are currently having these experiences in nature preschool. And so what can we do? And that was actually one of our discussion forums, was like, what are things that we can do within our programs or within, our own work that we can make sure that all children have access to this. So
yeah. I think that's I think it's something we're learning as a field. And a lot of times when we come up against these spaces, there's a feeling of, it can be uncomfortable and we don't really want to talk about it. And I think I was just reflecting on this. Whenever we have these points of discomfort or potential conflict, there is an opportunity to pull back. You can pull back, or you can embrace it really as an opportunity to build relationship. And that is something, one of, I think, the most valuable lessons I learned as a director was whenever something came up, rather than just try to hold on to it or downplay it, right? It was an opportunity to say, I'm going to come to, engage with families authentically, say, how are we going to work through this together? Utilize it as an opportunity to build relationship. And I think that's what we're trying to do as a field too, is to say, hey, we're recognizing that we know all kids have benefit from being out in the woods. They benefit from, the microbiota in the soil. They benefit from engaging with these, loose parts. They benefit from the growing, the contextual changes that take place in the environment, all of the different rich things that we know are a part of nature-based experiences. And so now that we're seeing and identifying and noticing, hey, there's some real barriers that are in place, then that's where we can start to feel really excited about this opportunity. And start to see these great webinars like we had last week with the Natural Start Alliance, featuring 2 programs in Atlanta and in New Jersey that are, cultivating community and based specifically on the needs of Black children. And so I think that's part of what is so powerful and important about the work that we're doing in this moment too.
How would people know about those kinds of webinars? How would people know what Natural Start Alliance is up to?
Yes, that's such a great question. And so the easiest way is I can share, you can head to the Natural Start website, you can become a member, and you don't have to, if you have a nature-based program, you can get it represented on our map. One of the really exciting things is that, to know is that Vermont has one of, if not, I'm pretty confident, has the highest percentage of nature-based programs per capita. But you don't have to be on the map. You can just join as a member. There's a great community there. It's a great way to stay informed about what's happening. And you can You can learn more and engage with our regional networks, and we share information about resources from all of the country. And it's just like a really responsive community. I did not always work with Natural Start. I feel lucky to work with them now. And the reason that I do is because they've been so responsive all the way through. From the time that I was first kind of figuring out what does it mean to teach in the woods, and didn't even realize there was a nature-based field. So it can be a powerful space to be a part of, and we're always here to kind of like the great thing about getting to think nationally and say, oh, it's not just Vermont. It's like, hey, actually in Colorado, they were dealing with a similar issue. Let me put you in touch with that person. Or there's just like a great community that's really excited about it and ready to share.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think too is that part of the, I guess it's called the list serve that the Natural Start Alliance has. And that's so great because like a great example is this past summer was the first time that we ever were really faced with air quality issues in Vermont. Yet other people in other parts of the country deal with this all the time, hopefully not all the time, but they have experience with this and dealing with the fallout of, smoke from forest fires. And so there were in that list serve, someone was like, oh, I need to know what to do. And it was like, boom, people are answering those questions. And so it feels great to feel that there's this, practitioners who are there to support each other. And so that I think is a unique feature of Natural Start as well.
Yeah.
One other thing I noticed is the acronym, the ONB, because one of the things that we have discovered in reading a variety of different sources throughout the semester is that the acronym that people use is different. And so part of, I think, that identity is, are you an NBECE, like a based early childhood educator, but not many of, this course is also for after school professionals. So then are you doing NBL, nature-based learning, or are you doing OL, outdoor learning? Or, that's kind of like, I think part of, as you form an identity and form more of a profession, kind of thinking about what do we call ourselves, or what is our, what's our acronym?
Exactly. Yes, it's so true. And I think the ONB arose out of the policy in Washington. We were trying to think about how do we encompass everything. And actually what the final legislation that was passed in Washington, writing this into law, was for outdoor nature-based childcare. And so it's for after school and even school age as well. They also passed too. But yes, how do we like create a space where we're all a part of it, but also like it's specific enough to identify the unique things that are happening?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about that Google group is even if you just join the listserv now, you can still go back and search threads. And so you can see topics and other conversations that have existed through time. So it's an easy way to like, tap into a lot of knowledge that.
I didn't realize that. So do you get to so I just look at it through email, but can you get to it through the website too? Is that how you search it on the website?
The website, it's a Google group. So once you are in it, you can go to, I think it's like groups.google.com. And as long as you're signed in, you should be able to see your group and then like and see all the threads.
Learning something new today. That's awesome. Yeah. And I find those threads, I mean, some of them aren't applicable with what I do, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Or, and it really is practitioners who are supporting one another, overcoming all kinds of different obstacles from, how to communicate to their licensor for insurance stuff, or, parent policy kinds of things. And I wanted to tell you one of the projects that we just recently did from the textbook, or how we used it, was in the administration section and the section on policies and procedures, and thinking specifically about the textbook calls it a school handbook, or most people would call it a family handbook. So in that section in the book, it talks about has 13 different bullet points. So the students went and reviewed, anywhere, whether it was from like down the road or anywhere in the country, they reviewed a family handbook from a program and kind of went through the bullet points to see, did they cover it? And just a little bit of our experience is almost all of them, or many of them, did not really do anything along the lines of land acknowledgement. And so that was kind of an interesting observation that we found. And also really not communicating clearly what it meant to that program as far as their outdoor time, or how, was it a commitment of like a percentage of the day that they would be outside, or what did that mean to that program? Because it's, it's kind of like on a, packaging for food, and it says, oh, it's healthy. It's like, okay, what does that tell us? But it was just, that was a fun assignment to kind of see how most of them, fit most of those criteria. But as far as the land acknowledgement, that really wasn't there. And also, talking specifically about what it meant to them to, and many of them also didn't have the equity and inclusion statements either. So I think those are two areas that, that we observed. Yeah.
That's a really powerful anecdote. And I think that's the exciting thing about Natural Start is getting to be a part of an organization that goes, hey, I wonder, let's like dig into this and create a space, a forum or a webinar, or, I'd certainly be happy to share. I'm sure we could share Fiddlehead's handbook, but I think it's an evolution too. I think when we first started doing land acknowledgements, we approached them in one way, and then we're starting to think about like, well, what are the next steps, and what, like what's it leading to, and how are we doing this in community, and where do we go from here? And so, I think that's the thing about equity work is having the opportunity to continually, like critically reflect and say, how is this helping to, how is this being responsive to the communities and the voices that it's intending to reflect, and breaking down structural barriers and moving toward change? And, what's the responsibility? What's the role? How does my identity shape how I'm engaging with this work too? And how are we all listening to each other, and recognizing that we can have different opinions and we can still work together to help ensure that all kids get to have these kinds of experiences, because they really are extraordinary. And
for sure. Well, I so appreciate you taking time to chat with us. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of like wrap up with, or I don't know. I feel like I have 1,000 other questions, but at the same time, I'm like, okay.
I guess what I would say is that this, for me, this has become so much of making sense of my identity, my responsibility, as based on my identity as a white woman here in Vermont, and figuring out how do I move forward and continue to learn. I feel so lucky to get to be a part of this community all over the country, to support networks and support just getting to learn and continuing to figure it out. So if you have questions, or you're interested in, figuring out how to connect, and this is something we always talk about, April. Yep. I think I'm always here. I'm in Vermont. Let's go for a walk. Let me know. I juggle a lot of things, so it sometimes, as April knows, takes a while to track me down, but I don't forget. I just I take a certificate out occasionally.
Yeah. And I think one of the things to know too is Natural Start does do an annual conference. So for 2024, it's an in-person one, and it's in Oregon. Is that right, Oregon, or is it in Washington?
Portland. And there's going to be some really exciting things, I think, that are a part of this conference. And it's been a little bit since we all came together in person. And so I think it's going to be a really exciting opportunity, and we'll definitely be there.
Yeah, I have I have plans on being there. I'm waiting for all of the, like when you're waiting for all the I have teenagers, two
Yes,
teenagers now. So
exactly.
then you're like, this is my plan. I don't know if it's going to fit into the plan, but I definitely hope to be there in Portland.
We do have
This,
plans to have certain elements will be available virtually too, so it won't be entirely hybrid, but the keynote, certain pieces, you'll be able
yeah,
to have.
yeah. And I think the last couple of years have been there have been virtual summits or virtual conferences, but I just love the idea of it being in person. And so hopefully, if folks can't go to 2024, the next time it cycles around, maybe it'll be an East Coast thing that'll be a little easier. And just one last question about this slide. Do we have a Vermont state network is there a group that meets virtually for, I don't
We
know.
don't. We have a Facebook page that was started many years ago, but we don't have a Vermont group. We have had some inside outside
Oh, yeah.
chapters that have met, but again, if anyone's interested in convening, that's something that I do. I've supported folks in states around the country and getting that off, and it's often just like shooting out that first email, sending out that first email, and saying, hey, do you want to have a call? And I can provide support for that. I can provide support for accessing, getting a sense of who's out there. So I'm always available to definitely, it's a dream. So happy to be a part of or support that.
I think that would be really good. I have so many both students and friends and from around the state, and it's like we're all doing this work, and it would be good to carve out time from people within our state to support one another, even if we're only 4 times a year, or some 6 times a year, and half were in person and half were online or something. I certainly would contribute to making that come to life. So
do it. We're gonna get Vermont on that map by the time.
yes, stay tuned. That's awesome. Well, Kit, thank you so much for being willing to be here today, and really appreciate the work that you're doing. And it really is awe-inspiring. I just think, the nature school that I started was in 2010. It was here in St. Johnsbury, called the Balch Nature School. And I did feel that feeling of isolation, and also am I doing this right? And what does it mean? And where, and I say, when this book came out, I was so excited. I'm like, it's a no fluff kind of book. There's not, it's not the book that has all the cute activities in it, but this is the book that helps you to be like, oh, right. And one of the things I would say is there's so many hats that people wear, in particularly people starting their own programs, it's like, it can feel really overwhelming. Like, I'm the teacher and the administrator and the marketer and and it's like that caps for sale guy with all of those crazy, number of things to do. It's like each one is a different role. Like, what cap are you wearing right now? But I feel like this is such a great tool, and we've really enjoyed it. Well, I say, at least I've really enjoyed it as our primary resource for the course. And I just think it helps us to kind of define, oh yeah, these are, some really important things to be thinking about. So anyway, I could.
Hey, that's what I frequently think of myself as like, that's exactly it. So much of almost all this work here that is represented is, as far as state or regional networks, is unpaid volunteer. They're wearing all the caps and they're adding another one. And so when I think about what my role in this a lot is to, and not to lead, but to say, how can I be the bandwidth extender, the capacity extender to support you so that you feel like, that you can continue to wear that
Yeah.
cap.
I love that. Well, I'm going to circle back in January to you to be like, okay, let's talk about this Vermont, get this up off the ground. And I know people around the state who would certainly, host some in-person events, because I think that's really what the virtual is awesome, but I think having maybe a mix of a couple of virtual and a couple in person would be a great way to, have an engaging group.
Great. And I'll send out resources and other things that are attached. I can share the whole slide deck so folks can look at.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kit. Bye.